All right, today I wanted to talk about fat loss and specifically some issues around fat loss that I see that cause people to struggle when they're first starting out. Now, this can apply if you've done a dieting phase before or if you are brand new to the process. So reason number one is you're super excited, you want fat loss fast, and so you do too aggressive of a calorie deficit right out of the gate. And now I have no issues with that if your goal is very short term, let's say 2 to 4 weeks. But anything longer, your hunger is going to shoot up, your energy is faster to decrease. And when you're trying to sustain that over longer periods of time, usually your appetite is going to win out. So that is one issue that I have with setting too aggressive of a fat loss, of a deficit kind of right out of the block. And it's something I see people struggle with when they are trying to set up their diet. Now, if you were to just go with a gentle decrease, maybe 15 to 20%, that's pretty conservative, but you're going to see some steady gains there, steady drops in this case, rather than starting out with, like a 25 or 30% decrease. Again, if you have a very short-term goal, by all means, and experiment and see how you do with, the 2 to 3 week period. But if you have longer, then I think, the 15 to 20% route is always going to be safer. Now, reason number two is your expectations of fat loss are unrealistic. Again, I understand just wanting to progress. You're excited. Maybe you've done some grocery shopping, you've gotten rid of things, like you're in a period of time that makes sense to take on this fat loss phase. But what ends up happening if you don't drop weight like consistently week after week after week, people start to lose faith in the process. And then I see it all the time. They start to splurge a little bit more on the weekends, and then that creeps into during the week, because it's like, if the scale isn't going to really drop for me, like, what is the point of doing this? But that's not the best way to view this. Even after I've had clients, I've witnessed it myself, where the scale hasn't dropped for 2, 3, even 4 weeks. And you never want to see that happen, but it does. The body sometimes has its own agenda, and then all of a sudden you'll get a 3, 4, 5 pound drop just out of nowhere. But as long as you trust in the process and you know that you're being 80 to 90% compliant with whatever your calorie goal is, with your steps, with getting sleep and stress management, and if you're doing those things on a daily basis, then chances are you're always going to experience a few quote unquote stalls that aren't really stalls. It's just the body going through whatever process it has to then drop that weight on the scale. But some other objective measures you can use aside from the scale, you can take progress pics. If your clothes are fitting differently, you can always monitor your waist circumference. If you take measurements elsewhere, maybe mid-thigh, around the chest, those are other things you can look at besides just the scale to gauge whether it's successful or not. Now, reason number three, it's an easy trap to fall into, but of course, at the end of the day, to lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. So however you can maintain that over a longer period of time, if you can do that, then the scale is going to drop. But people sometimes include too many processed foods. And the problem with, say, eating a bowl of Frosted Flakes versus eating, I don't know, a salmon fillet with some potatoes and broccoli, is the time of digestion on the latter versus the former, it's just going to be much slower. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my cereal, I love my treat foods every once in a while, but usually I reserve those things more for when I'm in a maintenance phase or I'm in a gentle surplus. Just makes more sense when you have much more calories to work with versus when you're in a deficit. It's like your calories count more because you're trying to get all of your nutritional needs met with a smaller pool to pull from. And so, if you're eating too many processed foods when you're in a dieting phase, you can find that you're just not going to recover as well. Your sleep will be a little bit more off, and those things too will work to increase your hunger. Now, these are just 3 things. There are many, many more, but these are, I believe, very, very important. They're really easy to kind of address initially to set realistic expectations, the 0.5% to 1% of total body weight per week. Like if you're averaging that you're crushing it. And any faster, and you can risk muscle loss versus actual fat loss, which is the opposite of what you're wanting. 2 is to really evaluate your time frame and to then adjust expectations from there. So if you have a longer amount of time, starting out with a 20% deficit isn't going to be too difficult for most people, especially if you're following, the rule number 3 and not eating too many processed foods. If you're focusing on whole food nutrition, whether that's 80-20 or 90% of the time you're compliant, which still gives you a tremendous amount of leeway. But these are things that I have actually experienced myself in past cutting phases, but also with clients. And these are the things I help people work through in my coaching practice to develop their best methods for not only a fat loss phase, but for maintenance and a muscle building phase, because these habits are interchangeable throughout each process and they're paramount for lasting results. So I hope that, those 3 things you were able to, they provided some insight, maybe something you hadn't thought about and you're about to embark on your fat loss journey. But if you did find value, please go ahead and share this video with somebody who might need this information. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you next time.